right, welcome back to episode 2 of the Conversion Matters podcast.
I feel like we should be in a piano lounge with that
Seinfeld episode. I am Caleb, and you are?
I'm Jeff.
All right, welcome. We're so glad you're here joining us again. That means you at least maybe enjoyed the first one, or at least got something out of it.
Or welcome, first-time listeners out there in podcast land.
Yeah. Podcast land is a term. Okay, we're so glad to have you here today. We're just going to get right into it. We're going to be talking about the art of evangelism. Okay, The art of evangelism. What do we mean when we say art of evangelism? There's a lot of different words there. Well, I guess 2, art and evangelism. What do we mean when we say that?
I think what we're wanting to look at is so many people, as we said in the last one, up to 90% of people don't ever share their faith. So how do we get to a point where it just has become something we've done? I mean, you think of great people, you think of singers, be it Bing Crosby with Christmas carols, or Michael Jordan in basketball, or Joe Montana, or people would say Patrick Mahomes now out there in Chiefs Kingdom.
Yeah.
But you think about people who have the art down because they're doing it well and it's second nature. And so when we talk about evangelism, talking about sharing the good news of Jesus. And so how do we make sharing the good news of Jesus second nature for us to where it is just a byproduct of who we are, and it's not something that we have to constantly struggle with?
Yeah, for sure. That's good. Okay, so art of evangelism. Evangelism is sharing a message. So then what would be the art of delivering a message more specifically?
The art of delivering a message.
How would you define that?
I think the art would be that, first of all, we're speaking truth in love, right? And we're obedient to the commission that God gave us. We spoke about this in episode 1, but the Great Commission given by Jesus back in Matthew 28 is where he tells us, I want you to go and I want you to tell people. Acts 1:8, same thing. The great missionary Hudson Taylor said, the Great Commission is not an option to be considered, it is a command to be obeyed. And so with this commission, with this great command that we're given that we're supposed to obey, how do we do it? Speaking truth in love and being obedient. Because a lot of people, they'll get out there and they'll make people feel terrible. A lot of people will, when it comes to sharing their faith, turn or burn, you sinner, you're going to hell. And
see people with signs on the street corners and with the megaphones.
Yeah, or people even posting social media posts, of some celebrity. Oh, they're going to burn in hell. They're going to do all this. And it's like, man, I don't think that's what Jesus would be posting on social media if he was ever on social. It would be interesting. That's another podcast. What would Jesus post on social media?
WWJP. What would Jesus post?
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I think even like if we take a step back, just what does it look like to deliver a message? I think that in itself is an art. There has been writing ever since, the early Greeks where like, what is the art of rhetoric? What is the art of speaking? What's the art of sharing a story? Yeah, and I think that there is something to that. And to me, art is something that you're not typically inherently good at. So Michelangelo didn't start by painting the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah.
You grow and you get to a place. And so an art or a practice, maybe an interchangeable word.
Absolutely. No, it's good.
But I think with this art of evangelism, we want to understand. I think the second S of bless is share your story, right? Yeah. Share your story, listen to their story, and share the story of Christ. And so we want to be people who are storytellers, who are able to engage with story in a way that can engage other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the whole bless approach that we're walking through right now, begin with prayer, listen, eat, serve, story. I think that all goes to, it's not a boom, 10 seconds and you're done thing. It's it is an art, right?
Totally.
It's an art like creating a masterpiece, or the art of designing something that you've worked on around your place, or building something. There's just it's a process a lot of times. Yeah. It's not a one and done, which we spoke to that a little bit last time as well.
Right, and I think also I'm just thinking through the word art. Right, art is also something that is not systematic. it's not something that is done the same exact way every time. And so art,
For sure.
there are different ways to do this evangelism thing. There's different methods, there's just different practices, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But art is something that is more fluid, I guess, if I can use that term, but something that it's not a B, C, D, this is exactly how you do it.
Yeah.
Is my point.
No, I think that's so true, and I think Paul was one of the greatest examples of that. We see him, when he was talking to the Jewish people, trying to tell them about Jesus. He went to the Jewish texts and he said, "Hey, remember this? This is fulfilled here. Remember this? Remember this?" And it was the callback to what they had memorized, put on their heart. But then in Acts 17, when he's in Athens, there's a statue to an unknown god. And so to the pagans, to those who worshiped all these gods, he said, let me tell you about this God. And he used their cultural context to tell them about Jesus.
He knew their poets. He knew different things. Paul was a guy who, using a big word, he contextualized the gospel to whoever he was talking to.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I get at with the fluidity of it, because sharing the gospel is not a one-size-fits-all thing. Different people are in different places and they need to hear different things. And so we can help that along by adapting to whoever we're speaking to, not adapting the gospel, but adapting how we present the gospel to that person.
That reminds me of a story that took place in the 1960s, Caleb. You weren't there, neither was I. Maybe some of you out there in podcast land were, but
I had about 30 years before I was born.
Yeah. Don and Carol Richardson, they went to a tribe in Indonesia, and they were trying to get the gospel across, but the village couldn't understand the gospel. Matter of fact, they valued treachery so much that they thought Judas was the hero of the gospel story. And and
That's
so they were
not true.
like, but what they realized was different villages were fighting over the Richardsons being there, and they had a baby. They had their son Steve with them, and they all wanted to be part of that. And the Richardsons said, "Hey, if you guys keep fighting, we're going to leave." And they saw one of the tribes, and these tribes, the Sawi tribes, they would actually befriend someone to ultimately kill them and then eat them. They were cannibals. And so, they were treacherous. That's why they thought Judas was so good. But when the Richardsons said they were going to leave, they saw one of the tribes bring a baby boy and offer it to the other tribe. And they found out that in their culture, that when a baby is given from one tribe to the other, there will be peace between those two tribes as long as that baby is alive. Until that kid or adult would die, there's peace between them. And it just clicked with them. It's like, this is the gospel message. And so they were able to take that and say, Jesus is the peace child, restoring peace between God and man. And so they use that, just like Paul used that. And I love that story because it's so powerful.
That's what contextualization is.
Exactly.
That is taking the gospel and giving it to people in a way that is palatable and understandable for them, while not marring the message of the gospel, while not messing up the message of the gospel. So Paul, the apostle, and you said Don and Carol Richardson. Don and Carol Richardson. Yeah. Two people, great examples of what evangelism looks like. You have any other examples of people who have done that well, who have done evangelism well? Yeah,
you remember there's an old school pastor by the name of Dwight Moody.
He's got a Bible college named after him, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does, and a lot of things. But so Dwight L. Moody was preaching one day, and after he got done preaching, a lady came up and said, "Pastor Moody." I don't think that was her voice, but we'll go with it.
I think it was.
Pastor Moody.
Exactly what she sounded like.
I don't like the way that you share the gospel.
You've never told the story with that.
I know.
Accent.
She went to different culture, right? But I don't like the way you shared that gospel. And Pastor Moody said, "Well, okay, ma'am. Well, how do you share the gospel?" She said, "Well, I don't really share the gospel." And Moody said, "Well, I like my way a lot better than yours." And so I think there's a great lesson in that. And Leonard Ravenhill, a great man of God that was really into missions, he said, "Any method of evangelism will work if God is in it. Be it a baby, be it an unknown statue, be it
it's a good word.
Flubbing your way through.
It's a good word.
I think sometimes we get so caught up in thinking that it's our words, but really the power of conversion, as we talked about last time, is all God's work. We're just to be faithful. So sometimes when I think I've shared my faith in just idiotic way
Oh, my
where
goodness,
I'm
yeah.
just like, oh, I flubbed that up. And then all of a sudden there's something big that comes out of that. I'm like, what in the world, God? That's totally God. And then, sometimes if there's too many words, you're like, oh man, I polished that thing and there's no response.
Can I tell you a story of something that happened to me relatively recently, actually?
Okay.
I was at Jersey Mike's, the sandwich shop.
See Danny DeVito?
I didn't. No,
Okay.
unfortunately. Hashtag not sponsored. We're not sponsored by Jersey Mike's. But I was there, and I had never been there before, and so I was at the wrong spot where I was supposed to order my sandwich. I was all sorts of flustered. And I went, the guy finally called me over. He's like, hey, come over here. I'll get your sandwich started. He got my sandwich. He started talking to me. His name was Jeff. That
Okay.
Caught my eye.
Great
'cause his name was
guy.
Jeff, yeah.
Great guy.
And we were talking, and he's like, hey, what are you doing today? Well, I'm in school right now.
You just
And-
gave him kind of a voice there. You said, hey, what are you doing today? Right? You make fun of my voice.
I'm in school right now, and so I said, well, I'm doing homework today, and because it was my day off, so I do homework on my day off. And he said, oh, what are you in school for? I said, Bible and theology is my degree. He says, oh, interesting. I grew up Baptist, but now I believe that all religions are the same. And I was like,
Jeff.
okay, Jeff. Well, the guy at the register heard us talking about this, and he said, "Oh my gosh, you're studying the Bible. That's awesome. I just got out of prison, and I've been reading my Bible every day with my wife. Like, cool
Wow.
story over here." But he
Wow.
he pulled me away from Jeff, right?
Yeah.
He pulled me away from Jeff, and we had a good conversation, and I told him, hey, check out, he was looking for a church. I said, check out Riverlawn. I haven't heard anything from him, whatever. Right. Like, that's a different thing. But he pulled me aside. He pulled me away from that conversation with Jeff, and then I ordered my sandwich. It was a lot more expensive than I thought it was going to be, and then I left. And I was like, man, I didn't really have that conversation with Jeff. And so I was like, should I go back in? No, that'd be too awkward, like whatever. And then I eventually was like, I'm just going to call Jersey Mike's. And so I called him, and I said, hey, can I talk to Jeff? Because I remembered his name.
Yeah.
Because it's your name. And I gave him the most, you said the word flub. I gave him the most flubbed, like, listen, you said you don't really believe in Christianity. Here's why I believe it. And it was garbage. It was terrible. But the point is that God can still use that.
Absolutely.
Even in my flubbing of
Yeah.
my words and my presentation of the gospel. Like it could have been a little bit messed up, but God can still use that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
God, in Numbers, we see God speak through a donkey. And I tell people a lot when they ask me about preaching, I say, well, he still does that through me. So
Yeah, he
it's interesting. So
through
Jeff,
donkeys.
the Baptist turned Universalist, and then
Right.
the prisoner turned Christian.
Yeah.
That's
I saw a lot in that Jersey Mike's.
Yeah, man.
that was an interesting day.
go Danny DeVito.
Yeah. Okay. So those are a couple of ways talking about Dwight Moody, Leonard Ravenhill. That's what it looks like to do evangelism well.
There's
to
some
do
different-
evangelism well is to do it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's to do it.
There's all kinds of methods, and we actually have a website that we put out there. It's not Riverlawn focused, but it's called nowwhat.love, and it's ultimately to try to get people to get the gospel out there, to share these cards and say, go to nowwhat.love. You're loved, you're special, you're valued. And there's different ways on that. The 3 circles illustration, which is real easy to explain. You've got the bridge illustration. We're talking through bless this month at church. One church I know, they do care, prayer, share. We had the opportunity this past summer to go to Ethiopia and see the Jesus film and see people come to Christ by watching a film that was made in 1969.
Crazy.
But it was just now put in the what was the language?
Baiso, the
Baiso.
language of the Baiso people. I don't remember what the
Baiso
language was
people.
called, but yeah.
The 60th language in Ethiopia with the Jesus film. I mean, which is crazy to have 60 languages.
The first movie they had ever had in their heart language.
Yeah. And it was at night. There was some rain coming down. We were outside, and we saw people come to Christ. And,
it was awesome.
And they had pastors with follow-up, getting them into churches and stuff like that. So the methods are so numerous.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Hey, tell a little bit about that. Tell about Ethiopia and what they were doing with digital missions.
Yeah, I mean, so a big thing of what they're doing there is they have all of these social media accounts. They have their own, like this organization has their own social media accounts, but they also equip just random people to make Christian content because you want to go where the people are. And right now, everybody's on social media. Everybody's on Instagram. Everybody's on Facebook. Everybody's on YouTube. Like
Everybody's in podcast land.
not as many, but everybody's on social media. And so what they do is they push out this content, and they just ask their network of people to share it. Like that's all it is. And there are millions and millions of views on these videos and posts and blogs and all these things. And then they also have their network. All these people are also creating content. So there's just so much Christian content going out there that people can't help but to see it and to just be confronted with the idea of who is this Jesus and where do I land in all that.
Yeah, and I think in episode 4, if I remember correctly, we're going to talk a little bit about empowering the church to be digital missionaries here. And we've got a good guy doing some video for us right now. Matter of fact, he's sitting right over there shaking his head up and down with an ugly Cubs hat on. But
old Zachary.
But he's going to do some of these digital things that we want to push out. So that's coming up. But there's lots of ways for that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so there's so many ways to evangelize, to share the gospel, but there are still people who don't.
Right.
One of the biggest ways is to just share the story of how Christ has changed your life. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the biggest ways. You hear their story, and then you share your story of how Christ has changed you, and then you can share the story of the gospel. Yeah. So what would you say to...
I call that their story, his story, your story.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Storytellers. Like this we are storytellers at our core. So what would you say to Christians then who aren't wanting to share the gospel, who aren't wanting to share their story or to evangelize?
Let me say something, and so they don't get mad at me. Let me say it from Charles Spurgeon.
Yes.
Every Christian is either a missionary or an imposter.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's heavy. I mean, it's saying you either share your faith or you're a phony. Mm-hmm. You're a fake. The one commission Jesus gave before he left was to share your faith. And if we don't do that, shame on us. Where's our allegiance? Is it more to our comfortability? Is it more to what I want? Or is he truly Lord of our lives?
Mm-hmm. That's great. So people still might have this like mental hurdle. Like, okay, mm-hmm. but how do I start? Like how do I get into doing, like, what's my first step? So what would you say to somebody who wants to start evangelizing? How do you start?
I think it does start with a prayerful obedience. Lord, help me. Lord, I want to be obedient. Lord, I want to be faithful to this, and constantly pray that. I think the B in bless is begin with prayer. Mm-hmm. If Christians, if there is one person who calls himself a Christ follower and they are not praying for someone's salvation right now, they are a fake. They are a phony. There's no doubt about that. And you can quote me on that, not Spurgeon. But then you just take the step of faith and obedience. There's a great scene in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade where he has to walk across a chasm, but it was to get to the Holy Grail to save his dad. And
right.
Spoiler alert. But it's that step of faith that you have to take that step of faith and know that God is going to use it. Just like you said, what happened to Jersey Mike's? We're just faithful to share. We share so many useless things that matter for nothing and will be forgotten tomorrow, whereas the one thing for eternity we keep hidden or secret.
Yeah, no, totally. Is it Kirk Cameron talked about how, dude, if you had the cure to cancer, aren't you sharing it? Like we have something that is greater than the cure to cancer, and we're not sharing it.
Yeah, that's good.
So, okay, let's close with this.
Okay.
Give us a couple of maybe practical points of next steps. Let's go. What are some practical ways that we can move forward in this and start to actually do this and do this well and do this in a way that honors God?
Yeah, no, I think one of the first things, and I alluded to it a couple minutes ago, but you pray for God opportunities is what I like to call them. God opportunities out there in podcast land. But you pray for them and you find them and you go forth. I mean, one of the ways, 1millionstories.org, you type up your story and you put it there, and then you have these business cards that we'll give you, and you put your number, and people just go to this website and they get to read your story, say, hey, go check out my story. It's a very easy way to start getting that ball rolling. You create a culture of soul winning, right? You care about those things. You pray over that. Then learning how to do that, you just what works best for you in your context. This is who I was before Jesus, and this is what happened when I met Jesus. This is who I am now that I am His.
And learning this, I mean, we have the Blessed Sermon series, so go watch those if you haven't.
Right.
If you haven't, and continue to watch as we continue to go through the series. These podcasts. There's podcasts out there on evangelism that are a lot better than this.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
so go listen to those.
They're sponsored.
Find resources. Find resources of people who are a lot smarter than us talking about this.
Yeah, and I think one of the other ways, Caleb, to do this is to have accountability. I think when we think that we're out there on our own, sometimes if we don't do something or we don't walk through with it, there's no accountability to it. And so have somebody, be it a family member, be it a friend, be it someone that you sit by at church, hold each other accountable. Hey, have you shared? We do that with our elders and pastors each month. We have reports that they turn in. Hey, who have you shared Jesus with? And there'll be times where elders and pastors say, well, I didn't this month. And it's like, okay, but if there's a couple months where an elder or pastor hasn't shared Jesus with somebody, then we're going to start saying, hey, wait a minute. We're supposed to be leading the charge in this. Right. And so have accountability, but prayer, and then just take the step of faith. See what works best for you.
That's good. All right. So the art of evangelism. Evangelism is an art. It is something that we can grow in, that we can learn to do better. It is something that is not an ABC. This is how you have to do it. It's something that you can contextualize to whoever you're talking about. These are all the things that we're talking about today. Okay. So do you have any final thoughts for us on the art of evangelism? What would you say is just a closing word, kind of concluding all of what we've been talking about today?
I think, once again, we got to stay with the truth. And if you don't know what Jesus has done for you, then are you truly His? Have you truly repented yourself? Maybe we have some here in this church. Well, I know we have some in this church that say they're Christ followers, but haven't repented or surrendered their life to Him. So I think that's definitely step number one. If you're not there, get there. If you want to know how to get there, text follow to what's the number?
316-444-4338.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
We'd love to talk to you about that.
Totally.
And get involved, continue to grow in your faith, but be faithful to the commission that He's called you to. Don't shirk it like most of those who call themselves Christians do. We see other religions, we see even cults going out 2 by 2 and doing a much better job, even though they're not anywhere near the true gospel. And we have the true gospel. We have that cure. And my goodness, we have got to tell people. I'm not saying that we beat them over the head or say turn or burn sinner, but we speak the truth in love, and we've got to do that. Yeah,
and I think, as closing words, I'd just say, man, the art of evangelism at its very core, you got to do it, first of all. You have to do it in order to learn to do it well. And you just got to do it in order.
What James 1:22 say? He coined this phrase long before Nike did, but James 1:22, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. Do what it says.
That's right. So go evangelize. Go share the gospel. Go do these things. Go put these things into practice. And if you, as we close out today, if you have any questions about anything we've talked about or anything we haven't talked about concerning conversion, evangelism, sharing the gospel, all this good stuff about the art, like what is the art of evangelism? If you have any questions like that, shoot those questions to info@riverlawn.org. We would love to answer those in our final episode in our panel discussion. So again, thanks for listening to episode 2 of Conversion Matters Podcast, and we will see you next week.